The career of Bob Rupert as a blacksmith has spanned over many decades. He has been a member of Abana, SOFA, ABA, and Western Reserve. He was the vice president and president of his local Abana chapter, Pittsburgh Area Artists and Blacksmith Association, and led local Abana-sanctioned seminars. He wrote and published a book called Fundamentals in Blacksmithing, was featured twice in the centerfold of the magazine Knives, and also featured in the books Ironwork Today 2 and Ironwork Today 4. He has taught at Touchstone Center for Crafts, John C. Campbell Folk School, and Tom Clark School of Forging. Bob has also been in a video series called Blacksmithing with Bob Rupert. While all of the videos have featured Bob teaching the art of blacksmithing, this video will focus on some of the knives Bob has made over the years.
Hi, I'm Bob Rupert here in Hookstown, Pennsylvania. It's September the 2nd or 3rd today, and it's a wonderful day outside, and we want to do a little documentary on knives. I'm hoping that you have an interest in what we're going to talk about today, and you'll be able to see some of the knives that I make over the years. I've been making knives for about 5 decades, I guess, and I learned from some of the top people in the world. They're all pretty much gone now except for me, so hopefully you'll be able to see through me what I learned from them. One of the main people I learned from was Bill Moran and Jimmy Schmidt and Hugh Bartrug, and they were very instrumental in my background for making knives. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and I hope you enjoy this video. So we'll discuss some of the knives we have here today, and I've laid some of the ones out that I brought down to my studio this morning, cleaned up a little bit so we have a workbench to work off of, and we'll go through some of the knives that are laid out here for you to enjoy and see how they're made. I don't have a milling machine and those kind of things. These knives are made in the process of pre-industrial age thinking. That means one piece is made and the next pieces are fit to that piece. And it's much different than today mass production, where you can replace a piece because they made it with a machine that is able to duplicate that process. These aren't made that way. I don't have that kind of expensive taste to have a milling machine, an EDM machine, and all those machines that you see a lot of people using today. I'm not saying that's bad, it's just not the way I make knives. These knives are made one at a time, and we'll take some of these knives apart. Almost all my knives are removable. The pieces are removed. The grip, the handle, and those kind of things are removed. You can take them off the blade and see how they're put together. Like I say, the primary knife that I think we want to talk about is probably this one here, the ST23. Bill Moran developed this knife years and years ago. It was sent to Vietnam with a few people. I never saw one there, but that's one of the knives that we'll be talking about. And then I have a bunch of other knives too that we have made over the past 5 decades. I have a little script here that I use to teach people how to make knives, and it starts out with this piece right here. It's a piece of 1/4 by 1 steel, usually tool steel. I use 5160 and 1085 or 1095. It's the most forgiving, has the widest forging range of most of the steels that you can get. It's available to you. You can buy it in bar form, and it starts out like that. And the next process to make a knife would be to profile the blade shape. Nothing else, just that shape there to put the point where you want it to be. That would be the second process. And then as you move along with shaping the blade, you start to create the blade itself. You can see the thinning of the piece, what they call a distal taper. It's thin from thick to thin. Maybe you can see it better on this side here. You see how it tapers from the main stalk to the point, thinner, like a chisel. That would be the third process, the taper, distal taper. And then you go on down the line here, and as that form blade edge and point, you'll notice that it's got a lot of different look than this piece here. You don't want to create this shape and this shape together. You want to do this shape first, and then you start to form the blade edge. And that will take the tip and swoop it upwards, because that metal that you're squeezing here is going to go somewhere. So that'll make the tip. Sometimes you have to pre-adjust the tip prior to doing that process. That's your blade edge, thinning it and making it wider, which will make it wider and form the tip. And then as you move forward, you'll see this, how much different this looks than when we started out. Tip is much higher than it was when we started, and it's much thinner too. So you create that shape. You'll be able to see that in both directions here. So that's the process of making a blade. Fairly simple. If you follow those steps, guaranteed you'll be able to make a knife. Guaranteed. If you can do one to the next, it'll come out just like this.
Systematic.
Yeah, just the way you want it. So you start out here and you wind up there. That's the two the process in between we showed you, and these are all been punched through to hook them together on this ring. So you have that process of actually making a blade, and well, that's just the way I was taught. We did a class up at RIT in New York with Bill Moran a number of years ago, back in '84, I think it was. And we had a gentleman, his name is Paul Tarantino. He's gone now too, but he was a phenomenal person that could draw whatever he could see as fast as you could do it. And you'll find that the American Bladesmith Society has those notes now that were created in my class. I watched him draw this stuff with a fountain pen, a Mont Blanc fountain pen, and during that class I got a hold of Paul. I said, "Hey Paul, come here a minute." I said, "I see all these people taking notes and they don't look like yours." I said, "Why don't we get the dean of the college to take your notes and record them and give them out to the people in the class?" So he agreed to do it. I had the son of the dean of the college in my class, Mr. Rose, and he took the notes to his dad, which was the dean of the college at that time, and had them reproduced. And you'll find those notes all over the place now. American Bladesmith Society is using those notes, and many others. They only have a portion of the notes, though. I have all the rest. There was two characters of those notes that were done, and I don't know exactly how they got those notes, but they're missing a lot from those notes that were done in that class. It was a tremendous class. I think there was 16 students that year were accepted, and I just happened to be one of them. I just was very, very fortunate to be able to get into the class and work with Bill Moran back then. And what an individual, let me tell you. A very unique individual. Some of the people in the class were the president of the Bladesmith Society back then in New Mexico was in my class. Paul Tarantino was in my class, and many others that were noted bladesmiths. I was not, but I did I did pay attention to what was going on, and I can make a knife pretty close to what Bill Moran made back then. The ST23 is one that you can see is quite similar to Bill Moran's knife. Bird head handle, file work, and the shape of the blade and everything. And it does come apart, which we will take apart. I'll take that apart now so you can see how that works. It's got a nut on the back that unscrews, that's attached to the tang of the knife, which goes clear through the center of the blade. Actually goes through your handle. There's the first piece that comes off. Well, the nut and the washer comes off. It has file work on it that Jimmy Schmidt showed me how to do from New York, and that attaches the blade. It's got a little pin in it too, a little silver pin that indexes the handle to the rest of the knife. And then this slides off of the blade, and you can see it's got silver wire inlay, which I was taught by Bill Moran how to do that. And the shape of the knife, a curly maple handle. Most all of Bill Moran's knives were curly maple, and he never really said why he did that, but I can tell you now, I discovered that this wood is very, very, very strong and very light. And two main things that a knife needs to have. It needs to be able to cut something. It also needs to bounce, so it doesn't fall out of your hand in the process of doing the work that it was designed to do. So curly maple was the wood of choice. It's not been stabilized or anything like that. It is part of the process that Bill used. He used a dye, Fibbing's wood shoe dye, that was used to stain this piece after the silver wire inlay work was done. This particular handle rattled a little bit, so it is filled with pewter on both ends. Can't see this end very well because it's got a cover on it, but there's pewter that was poured liquid in the blade. The blade was smoked so it doesn't stick to it, and then that filled the gap. It doesn't have epoxy or that kind of thing. It's pewter, and you'll see the end of it. You see a little bit of the shininess there that fills in the gap, which makes the knife handle very, very tight to the blade. You can see how there's no movement whatsoever. It fits. It's a pre-industrialized thinking, is what I was trying to point out before. This piece here slips on there fairly tight. I can get it off. Pre-industrialized thinking, I guess. Yeah. This piece here, the finger guard, is also filed similar to the tail, and it has a hole in it, a slit hole that fits to the blade. It's not rectangular shaped, because this knife was not formed with a milling machine or accurate method that is maybe used today by a lot of knife makers. This was made one piece at a time. The first piece of the blade was this piece, was the blade. 5160, it has, it's been etched with my name and the date on it. You can see that on this side. So if you want to see, if I made the knife, you take the handle off and you could be able to see the name on it and the date. I think this was 2010 is the date on this particular knife. As you see that the blade shape goes through and then is made to tang, this is threaded on the end to put the nut to captivate all the pieces on the knife. This piece here has the angle that the handle fits to, and your finger guard that goes on here. They slide together. fairly snug. That's backwards. Goes on that way, I guess. And usually it will only go on one way. If you get it on wrong, you'll find out that it's not very good. You can see how that snugs up, and no gaps whatsoever between the finger guard and the blade ricasso. So there's the pieces that you see. This knife blade isn't finished yet. It's not been sharpened, and it's going to be engraved up in here. So I haven't hardened this blade yet. So as it gets engraved, then we'll harden the blade and sharpen it. It's a little heavy yet because of the metal has to be removed. You'll see how it's fairly heavy, weighted, because it is not finished, and when it gets to be finished, then we'll hopefully be able to balance that knife in its entirety to make it bounce. You can see how this pulls together with a 1/4-28 nut on the end, and you'll be able to see it's just a little heavy right now because the blade has not been finished. So that's the ST23. Bill Moran always had a sun and a moon on his knives. I put a sun on this one, and most of the pieces that you see, the leather work and everything I do, this is sole proprietorship of that particular knife. I like to etch the knives to create a scene on them, and that eliminates finger marks that will appear on a shiny knife, and you'll see how that is very helpful to keep that from happening. Now this knife is sharp, so it will cut you if you're not careful. It's got a curved finger guard and a unique kind of I'm not seeing too many people use this kind of a clevis to pull the pieces together. It has a wedge that holds all the pieces together. That can be knocked out. Yeah. That slides out, this little piece, this wedge, slides out of the back of the knife. It goes on the butt cap, and that butt cap slips on there, and this all comes apart, just like the other knife. And you'll see how that, it's got a maple handle on this one, not curly maple, but just regular maple. And you'll see how the end of that knife has a slot that's not rectangular, it's shaped just like the blade. And then the tail end piece is square, and then the blade shape, let's see what dates on Bob Rupert, made by Bob Rupert, let's see, 2010 also, July 18th. And it has a square hole in here that accepts that wedge that holds everything together against the ricasso up here. And just how that one goes together, just giving you kind of an idea of how the knives are put together. That goes in there, and then that's tapped down, and it draws that whole piece together. See how that goes. So that's that particular knife. This was a Lewis and Clark knife. I did a knife for Lewis and Clark, and it has all the places where Lewis and Clark started out with the boat, the progues, and the stuff that went down the river. Most people don't realize that the knives and stuff like that were created back then. This is the knife that I pinned the scales on, so this one does not come apart. It has a full tang handle, file work up in here, and it has shin bone from an animal that was used to create the grip. And shin bone goes on there, and it's pinned. There's little tiny pins that were balled up on the end to put them together. And so you have that style knife. It's kind of an odd looking knife. I found this knife someplace. I copied it. There's not many knives today, or I designed that knife myself. Knives have been made for 2,000, 3,000 years. It's hard to come up with something that somebody hasn't already made. But anyway, it was an odd shaped knife up in here. You can see how this it goes up in the air instead of down. And I'm not sure why they did that. But anyway, this one is also sharp and has a leather sheath it attaches to. As we move up the line here, maybe this is a knife I competed with at Southern Ohio Forge and Anvil 1 year. I don't remember what year that was. It's probably on here somewhere. 2005. I competed with Mr. Fisk and a few others, and I had never done that before. And so somebody asked me from that Southern Ohio Forge and Anvil to compete because they knew I made knives. And I said, oh, sure. So I made a knife here in my studio. And the knife that I made didn't turn out. I made it out of a torsion bar from a Chrysler, which Bill Moran used to do that all the time. Older Chrysler products. And every time I tried to harden it and heat treat it, it would twist. It took on the twist from the torsion bar. So at the last I had to throw that piece away and start with something new. This is 5160 here. And got it done about the same time, but a friend of mine was picking me up to go to SOFA. And I was down on the floor right here chopping away at a 2x4 to see how it would work. And it seemed to be okay. So I went to SOFA with this knife, and I etched on the knife arts and inspirations. I think I put on all the people that helped me make knives years and years ago. And you'll see the scene on here is the competition itself. And I said I took second place. I should have probably won that. They had a bunch of bottles to cut off during that competition, and he cut 3 and I cut 3, and afterwards I cut 11 bottles with one swipe. So I could have won that easily if I'd have known. You really need to go in that competition more than one time for your abilities to be shown. So that's my competition knife. And then I have this particular knife. This is one of the bigger knives. I was at a swap meet one day, and I saw this particular knife and just in pieces. It didn't have the whole thing here at all. So I thought, well, that's a unique shape. So I thought I copied it on a piece of paper and brought it home. And I made the blade. That would be the first piece. Pre-industrialized thinking. Made the first blade. And then it got very, very difficult. I found that the handle that goes on the blade was a certain octagonal shape. And it had this brass fitting up here. Extremely difficult to fit to the handle. Extremely difficult. And your finger guard was very difficult too. This is made out of wrought iron. You'll be able to see the pattern in it. That's a natural pattern of wrought iron when it's etched. You'll see it's got like a kind of a odd patina to the surface, and I really, really liked it. It's very difficult to make this piece, the finger guard, the right length so it can be put onto the handle and fixed. It wasn't all that simple. I thought it was going to be really easy to do, but I found out that I was wrong, absolutely terribly wrong in that process. But the hardest part of this knife was to make this piece here. Very, very, very difficult to shape that to fit around that octagonal shaped handle and slide it on there. This comes apart too. It has a a wedge fitting in the back. Holds it all together. And I can take that apart if you'd like to see that apart now. So we'll just leave that go. It's sort of a halyard. I think that's called a halyard. I etched on the surface here Monitor and a Merrimack. You'll see that on the surface of the blade. So Civil War type knife. And it goes in the sheath here, and it goes in it like that. So as we move along, I have made a few knives, small ones. Bill Moran made quite a lot of these skinners like this. He called it a metal skive, and you'll see how that, it's got a big swoop to it, and it's made to cut leather thickness down in half. So it has a curly maple handle. It's not been dyed. It has file work on the tang. Full tang knife, you see how it goes from thick to thin, and that's mainly because of the balance. It's very, very difficult to get a knife of this size to balance because it's so short. So you don't want to add anything to that. It's got brass rivets to hold the handle on onto the blade, that is, and it's got your shape of the blade just like Bill Moran would have made. I had a number of them in my hand over the years. It has a small scabbard that it goes into, and you have that. Bill Moran had a case that he had a couple of knives in, and I copied the silver wire inlay off of that case. Of course, it was much, much bigger, but I put it on a belt buckle, curly maple belt buckle. You'll see that, if you can see that in the video. It might be a little hard to see, but it's been silver wire inlaid in that shape and put into the curly maple wood. I get that material from Hagshoff and Stone in Philadelphia. I think they're still in business. And then it's actually cut with a tool into the wood, and then the silver wire is hammered into that groove. And some people think that's glued in there. It's not. It's just hammered in there and then sanded and filed off. We're going to move on to another knife that I've had for a long time. This knife was ordered by a person, never picked it up, and it's a Damascus knife that has two handles. It's got a bone handle, and it has a curly maple handle with silver wire inlay. And you'll notice the knife, it will not balance because it's too short with a bone handle. But when you put this handle on, that's why I made this, it's perfectly balanced. It's a Damascus blade. I don't know how long it would be, probably 6-8 inches long. Filed finger guard and Damascus butt cap. This butt cap turns off the back of this. If I had a leather hammer, I could knock that loose, and then you'll see all the pieces will fit on there. It seems like when you make Damascus, you can make it 1,000 layers and all this, but you can't see it. So 300 or 400 layers is a nice depiction of your blade surface. See the bottom line here has been resisted, so that was not etched. That's why you see that line across the bottom. So anyway, that's a Damascus knife. Fits in a sheath that has a rolled edge, and it fits in there like that, and has two handles, one curly maple, which will make it balance, and one not. This is another Damascus knife with Mokum Gain fittings on it. You'll see how the surface of that one is quite nice. It's got L6 in it, which gives you the shiny layers across the surface. And Mokum Gain, it's dissimilar metal fusion that's created the fittings on both ends, and it has a nut and pinned end. I don't know if you can see the end of it. You see the colorations changing on the end of that blade for the butt cap. Curly maple handle, not stabilized or anything like that. It's just standard curly maple. Oh, this one isn't curly. It's a hue bush. That's a hue bush that this is made from. It's fairly soft wood, and I think I like the color of it, the little marks in it and whatnot. Things that are natural seem to appeal to me more than things that are unnatural, like stabilized wood and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's a knife there that goes in this sheath here, like that. And then there's another knife here on the end. Let's see what this one looks like. Oh yeah, this is my Vietnam knife. I did go to Vietnam back in the 60s, 69, and you'll see I have all the locations that I visited while I was there. I worked for the First Air Cavalry back then, and you'll be able to see some of the locations, Song Bay and all those different places that are on the surface, etched on the surface of that blade. Both sides have scenes of the provinces and things that I were there. I don't remember when I made this particular knife, but it's pretty nice. This one has a pin right here that holds the handle onto the rest of the blade. The little pin goes through. That pin you can push out. It's wedge shaped, and then the blade can come off of the handle and the blade can be separated. It's got a stag handle on the back, and it's more right-handed than left, but anyway, pretty nice knife. Yeah, some of the places I was at was Song Bay, Lai Kay, Phuc Vinh, Swan Lock, Tay Ninh, and so on, Saigon. And anyway, that's that particular knife there. Goes in that sheath there. And I did make a few friction folders. We used to go to a Ashokan campus every year in New York, up at the Ashokan Lake, and there was any number of individuals that come there. And this is what they call a friction folder. It has a tang that sticks out that lays against the bone, which keeps it from going all over, and it has a fitting in the front that pivots on. It's got a little Indian on the back, and on the front it's got a ruby-eyed gargoyle on this side of the crown. It's been etched and cut into the surface, and there's two ruby eyes that make up the front of that blade edge. You say this one opens. It's what they call a friction folder. When you make these, you try to make the blade obviously first, and then the slot has to be cut to mimic that width of the blade, and it closes up and fits in this little pouch, which has a rolled edge also. You can see how the sheath holds the blade and will protect you from getting really cut. One time I had this in my pocket, and it was slightly open. I stuck my hand in my pocket. It just sliced me all up because it was sort of open. So then I immediately made a sheath for it, There's a smaller knife here. I don't think I showed this one. Bone handle, not on the end, short blade, a little bit of artwork here on the Picasso area. It also has a sterling silver fitting in here. If you notice that the fitting goes onto the blade first, and then the finger guard goes against that. This was done for a main purpose of being able to fit the blade to the finger guard. When you have a blade that is punched, not cut through, so that the finger guard can slip down on that, it's very hard to get the pieces to fit together and not have a gap. That's what this silver fitting does for you. It's punched also, but it has a little bulge in it. If you notice, if you look at it real close, you'll see a bulge in the sterling silver piece, and you want to leave the bulge because that will allow you to fit the blade and the sterling piece so that there's no gaps. And then behind this you'll find probably a gap in the finger guard, and that's what that covers up. Most of the knife makers are always trying to cover something up, a mistake or whatever, and that's how you do that, is with fittings reveals that go on one piece at a time, and you correct the problems as you go. This one comes apart also. I could probably take that off so you can see that. Take the hat off the back. This is a quarter inch nut on the back of this one. Take that off there, and this pushes down, and then the pieces. It's got a rectangular slot in it also, but I can almost guarantee it doesn't fit perfectly, because that's why I made this particular piece. A little better look at that now. See how it bulges up around the blade, and that can allow you to cover up a problem if it does exist. This is pretty good, but it still has a little bit of a gap around it. You see it fits a little loosely on there, but that's what that piece there does, is it fixes that problem. Fits on pretty loosely. I don't have a date on this one, but I didn't etch this one, so I don't know when I made that one.
89.
Yeah, could be. But yeah, that sterling silver piece was a piece that fixed that. That little bulge goes up around both sides of the blade edge and captivates that, and then your finger guard, which is filed and fits to the blade, rectangular piece cut in it. Goes on there, and then your other pieces that fit to that slide right up on the handle, grip. This one is oh, there's something too. This has been drilled on the end. The reason why that's drilled is to help that balance somewhat. It's got a little pin sticks out that indexes the butt cap to the rest of the blade. And you know that going on there like that. All goes together. Then the nut captivates those pieces together and pulls it, draws it together so it's nice and snug. Yeah, like that. That's a really nice grip on this particular knife. So, and then it's been filed on the end for it to fit. Anyway, there you have that particular knife. It's got a kind of an unusual handle or grip or sheath that the edge has been sewn together, not on this edge, but in the middle. So that's our knife tour for this morning in Hookstown, Pennsylvania. And my name is Bob Rupert. I hope you enjoyed this, like I said before, and I hope you had a pleasant time watching this on the TV or whatever you have to view it on. And we'll go from there. Jimmy will take this back and work on this for a few months and get it all set up and put on the internet. Thank you so much.